I'm Dick Robinson, and I've been in the dairy business all my life, and right now I'm out of the dairy business, doing nothing. uh, I was involved in the ownership group of the baseball franchise that is now called the Colorado Rockies. In 1990, I had a phone call from Governor Romer, and he said, we formed a committee to go out and raise $95 million, and you got a couple of weeks to do it. And I've asked Jim Baldwin and Trig Marin to be on the committee, and you're going to chair it. And I knew Roy quite well because we were classmates at Colorado A&M College, which is now Colorado State University. So we started meeting. First thing we did was sit down, put down every name we could think of that we thought would have a chance to be part of the ownership group. And we started making phone calls. We split the list up with Jim, Trig, and myself, and I got to give Trig a lot of credit. He really got involved and did an awful lot. But I called everybody I knew, and Trig did the same, and so did Jim. And we eventually got some interest. For example, I called Ken Montford, who I also went to school with at Colorado A&M, and we were classmates, and I knew Kenny quite well. And explained to him what we were doing, and Ken said, let me call you back. He said, let me talk with Dick and Charlie. Let's see what the interest is. 2 days later, he called me back. He said, we had a meeting with Dick, Charlie, and myself. I spent the first 30 minutes telling him what a terrible deal this was. Dick took about another 20 and backed me up and even had some stronger words. And Charlie said, have him call me. And the Montforts were a big investor in this original thing, as was Jerry McMorris, a guy by the name of Kerry Taraji, who John DeQ brought in, Lee Larson from the KOA, Linda Alvarado, and I'm trying to think of the one. Orrin Benton, who came in and then went out. And we put together a pretty good group, and we really needed a major contributor. And I called Dan Hoffman, who was at HRO, Home Robertson Owens, and said, Dan, you got to get involved and help me. And Dan said, let me call you back. And Dan got Paul Jacobs, who was a partner of his at HRO, as the key and the lead to go get it done. And Paul got a hold of Steve Kurtz at Schenck & Kurtz, which was an accounting firm, and they put together most of the numbers for this. And then Paul discovered someone back in New York or New Jersey, I'm not sure what, I think it was New Jersey.
Ohio.
Was it?
Ohio.
Was Nicholas from Ohio?
Oh, Nicholas might have been from New Jersey.
No, he was from New Jersey.
Yeah.
No, New Jersey. Oh, sorry.
I thought it was in New Jersey. A guy by the name of Mike, you can edit this, I assume. So if I stutter, you'll take it out.
No. Yeah, we'll do it.
A fellow by the name of Mike Nicholas, who personally was going to invest $7.5 million and had a group together that had another $22.5 million for a total of $30 million. And that was really the key group that got this thing going. That was the angel that came across with the most money. And I always remember the last day that we were discussing this, and we met at the penthouse at the hotel, the Weston Hotel downtown. And the governor was there for this meeting. The governor did not make all the meetings. A lot of them he missed, but he was there for this meeting, and we had to make a decision. So we went into the bathroom, because there was no place we could go by ourselves, and we had the whole, excuse me, the whole floor. Went in the back room, and we're talking about it, and Roy turned to me and he said, what do you know about this Nicholas? I said, only one thing. He said, what's that? I said, he's got $30 million. And I said, we've got no choice. We've got to try it. And as I often say later on, most of the guys that were involved in that are now out on work release. It seemed to work. We determined that we had this group, and I can't remember all the names, but I think I told you. Linda Alvarado and Michael Goldberg with a liquor distributor. They all had minor parts. The major contributors were Nicholas, Jerry McMorris. Coors put some money in, didn't want to. Pete says, we did the stadium, we don't need this. And I don't know what the Montforts put in. I can't recall the numbers. I should have written this all down, but I didn't. But we decided to go ahead with it, and we had to make a press conference. And the next day, I met with the governor in his office. Now, this was unusual because Roy usually didn't like to have anybody share the stage with him. But when he heard that all I knew was $30 million, he says, you're going to sit next to me when we make this announcement. So I knew who was going to get hung if there was a failure of this whole thing. But we announced it, and it got rolling, and we did raise $95 million in the 2-week period. Put the application in, it was successful. And Trig and Jim were both great help on this, especially Trig. Trig Marin was superb on this. He worked his tail off on it. And I think he and I made, I don't know how many phone calls. I called people, but I won't tell you what some of them told me to do. Because they said, are you crazy, baseball? But you have to think about this. Actually, it was 95 plus some other things, but a total of 120 million was originally invested. And what's that club worth today? Billions, billions. What else would you like to know?
So you had a short amount of time from the amount of time that the issue had passed the legislature, and then we had to expedite the election.
Right.
From a general election to a primary.
That's right.
Because Major League Baseball had set up the timetable for when presentations were going to be made.
That's right. We had to get it done. The 2-week period just stays solid in my mind. I know it was 2 weeks is all we had. I'm trying to think of actually how things worked, and I don't recall. You know, but I do remember that we only had 2 weeks to do this, and if it weren't for this Mike Nicholas, we wouldn't have gotten it done. And he brought the rest of his group were Mickey Monos and Steve Earhart and Antonucci. And Antonucci was a good guy, Earhart was a great guy, and Monos had a little problem. But that was and Orrin Benton was also a big investor in it. And I don't think Orrin knew that much about baseball, but he just listened to Jerry McMorris and the rest of them. He did a good job for this city. All of these people were shooting craps because we had no idea, they had no idea how successful it would be. And you think about it, here's probably one of the most successful baseball franchises in the country.
So once you picked Paul Jacobs and his group to carry the ball for the next couple of weeks before the presentation to Major League Baseball, did you stay involved in the process?
Oh yeah, we were involved up until the time that the baseball said yes. We were involved. Actually, the governor picked Paul. I got Paul through Dan and presented him, and I think maybe Danny and the governor talked, and there were some reasons. Paul did an outstanding job, as did Steve Kurtz. They really were very, very good. And it was a very cohesive effort by everybody that was involved. We all had the same goal, whether you were Democrat, Republican, or agnostic. You had a shot at getting something done here. It was, and the times were not great. The Resolution Trust Company was involved in a lot of different things at that time, like taking over banks, and things were not good. But the people that invested did it to make sure that Denver was going to remain a major force in the West become a great city, and they did.
So you continued to work with Paul Jacobs and the ownership group until
Until the deal was done.
Until the deal was
And
done.
I think Paul actually worked all the way through and worked with Jerry when Jerry took it over. I'm trying to think, Antonucci, I think, was the lead for Monas. And I don't know where Earhart fit in, but Steve Earhart fit in. You probably have the information on that.
Well, it was, I think, our understanding that Steve Earhart was the executive director of a basketball group that
Yeah, you're right.
Antonucci and Monas were a part of.
You're right. You're bringing it back to me. Thank you.
and that's
I
how-
make a lot of new friends every day.
You and me both. So, I know that you certainly at that time were a very successful businessman in your own right. And what inspired you to want to donate your time and get engaged and work on this? What made you say yes when the governor called?
Because he wouldn't let me say no. I'll be honest with you, he would not let me say no. I said, Roy, I said, I think I might have even been chairman of the chamber at that time. I'm not sure, but I knew I was involved. And I said, Roy, I'm on 50 different things. He says, now you're on 51. He just said, you got to do this.
So were you excited about getting Major League Baseball?
Oh, sure, yeah. You know, I love it. I think Dick Monfort's doing a great job with the team. I know Dick quite well. Watched him grow up. And it's a great, great franchise. Look at the seats that are filled every game. Oh my God, you look at that, it's one of the most successful franchises in baseball.
Still pretty amazing.
The Broncos and the Rockies are it. The Avalanche and the Nuggets are trying, and they're looking better this year. But
So back in those days, the late 80s and early 90s, Denver was certainly in a deep recession. Some people called almost a depression, that it was, and it was probably the longest drawn out economic downturn that we had seen. And we had other public projects going on at the same time. There was
the
airport, the Denver Public Library, and some early polling that was done said that, you know, this issue probably couldn't pass. So what were your feelings at that time?
Well, you hit all the key things. We were in a real funk in Denver. Things were not good. And people thought it wouldn't, but I watched the Broncos and saw what they did. And even though we were in a depression, there was a waiting list for tickets, and people couldn't get in. Even the Nuggets were playing pretty good basketball at that time. I don't think the Avalanche were here then. I'm not sure. And I thought, well, this would round out what we have. We would have Major League Basketball, Major League Football, and now Major League Baseball rounds out a whole city. I said, we've got to give it a shot. And I think it passed pretty handily. I don't remember the numbers, do you?
It wasn't that handily. It was only 54%.
Well, that's still...
Well,
Anything
it's
over
above
50% plus 1.
50.1 is good, yeah. No, I really felt that this city needed that. Now, the amazing thing is what we did with Mile High Stadium, where they played for the first, 3 years, 2.5 years?
2 years.
2 years. Where there were some games, 75,000 people sitting there watching it. And you'd watch the east stands float back on water for about, to get an outfield built on that. And it was something. We knew we were right when I saw that opening game, which I went to, and those stands were packed. They were absolutely full, and what's his name hit a home run?
Eric Young.
Eric Young, the senior Eric Young. And that crowd went nuts. But it was worthwhile. The interesting thing was getting some of the heavy hitters. I talked to Mickey Miller, and he called Marvin Davis. And Marvin at that time was trying to buy the Oakland team, if I remember correctly, and that didn't fly. But Marvin wouldn't buy it unless he owned it all. And we were happy that we had a diverse bunch of owners, even though we didn't know the major one. But they were diverse, and there were some heavy hitters in this town. Jerry McMorris was doing great with Northwest Transport. You take a look at the Montforts, who were doing, everybody were big people in this state, and they were people that had been here a long time and grown up, and really were old Denverites. And I thought it was great. But there were some interesting times. The governor was, I wouldn't say he was pushing, I'd say he was shoving to get this thing done. He said, he'd call me every day, how we doing, how we doing? And I said, we're getting there.
Well, it sounds like there were a lot, you and Trig made a lot of calls, and that...
You'll see it on the list here. I gave you all my papers, you can see the calls. That's a real mess, so don't feel bad.
So you guys had a lot of rejection, but then the support you got was good support?
If we got a no, we rang the bell, or we got a yes, we rang the bell. I mean, it was, they were that.
Well, part of it was the economic condition that Denver was in at that point, the major part of it.
Actually, we had trouble. We couldn't get the cable people in because they could not, there was some rule that they couldn't be involved to a point where.
Yeah, Turner had problems with Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball didn't want cable people involved in ownership.
Yeah.
Well, that was explained to us by Trig and others.
Yeah, that's Trig. Well, that's why Trig was there to get the baseball people. Jim was there to get the retailers, and I was there to get the dregs. Anything that was left afterwards.
Anybody else with money, huh?
Right. So then, did you get any season tickets? How many did you get?
30. I got 32 seats. They told me pick what I wanted. I picked 30. Well, I ended up with 32 because all my friends said, "Can you help me get seats?" So we took 32 and parceled them out. We still have our 8 that we started with. 8 on the first row next to the dugout on first base, and 8 between third and home in the club level. Do I go to a lot of games? Not a lot, because the television has made a lot of difference. I can sit at home and drink a beer and sit in my family room and watch it rather than fight the traffic. The parking is still not great for that.
Right.
But if you go to a game today and you look at the bars next to it, people are not even going to the game and they just want to be in the atmosphere.
You know, that's absolutely the truth. I know Neil and I have gone to several opening days, and of course the tickets are sold out.
Oh.
The streets are massively crowded. You couldn't get into a bar if you wanted to.
You know, I am invited, the Montforts invite me to that VIP party they have every time. And I just wander around and I shake my head and I said, how did we ever do this? How did it ever get done? And it was fun. It really was fun. My milk business went to hell for a while, but that's all right. Now, Eddie was there to watch that. But,
well, I think, you know, talking about we got it done, is that Neil and I have always felt that this effort was much like a relay race. And that
hand the baton off to each person.
That's exactly right. And any person could have dropped the baton, and we wouldn't have Major League Baseball today.
Well, we were lucky. I was lucky I got hold of, Dan Hoffman got involved because he got Jacobson and Kurtz. And Kurtz did all the numbers on this. You'll see some of his numbers there. I don't even know how. And the copy paper, it's not as that thin stuff, because that was the copiers that were
the
there.
old slick stuff, yeah.
But it was a fun deal. It was.
So just to explain to some people who may not understand the role that Kurtz and Jacobs played, Kurtz was the head of an accounting firm?
Schenck and Kurtz, they were a boutique accounting firm that did complicated things. And this was a complicated thing. It was all swag. You had to guess for what it was
Right.
going to be. There was no history. I mean, everything was pro forma, so.
So
But he did a good job, Steve.
they were having to guess what the attendance might be. They would have to
They
guess
you'll
what
see that
TV
projection.
revenues might be.
You'll see the projection. I left
Projections?
you the
Uh-huh.
deals on those financials. They were done by Kurtz.
And then Paul Jacobs was responsible for putting together the legal work on how the
No,
partnership
Paul,
would be?
Paul Jacobs was the one that got Mike Nicholas. They're the firm. That's what he was really responsible for. I don't know who did the legal work, but there was somebody that probably the ownership group hired to do that. Paul was looked at it, but I'm not sure he was the lawyer for anyone there. But he did represent the ownership group as a whole, but not any one individual. And I think Nicholas and Monas and Antonucci really created the first structure that was there. And then Jerry McMorris came in with Elmore, Warren Benton. Warren Benton put a lot of money into this.
And Orrin Benton was a former accountant who was into uranium and some
He was
natural minerals
Yeah,
and
he was
things.
a mineral guy. It made a lot of money, and it lost a lot of money, so it happens.
And so if you had it to do over again, if the governor called you on the phone?
He lost my phone number because I subsequently chaired Bruce Benson's campaign
Oh.
against him. No, I would do it again. We did a lot of that stuff that was good. I'm still on the board of the Art Museum, and I still do some of these things, but not as much.
Well, Neil and I certainly thank you for your contribution.
Oh, it
It
was
was
Thanks for diving in and
Did I
Right.
give you
putting the
anything you
pieces
didn't
together.
know?
a lot of things we
Yes,
didn't know.
yes.
Yeah.
Quite a few things. Well, thank you, Dick.
All right. Hey, it was fun. I'll leave this whole